Award-winning futurist researcher and keynote speaker Nikolas Badminton joining us on Canada Now. And Nick, this week we look at the World Economic Forum's Global Risks Report that came out recently for 2021 in Switzerland. And it's the result of consultations among world leaders, economists, scientists, top business executives. It was titled Fractured Future, so not feeling too good about that.
Well, every year the World Economic Forum sort of brings together, hundreds of people to really comment on where the world's going. And as we know, everyone gets together in Davos, and it's very exclusive. It costs a lot of money to be there and to attend, and everyone sort of pats each other on the back. And some say we've done a good job, and some say that it's not been so great. And this year, you know what, they're really going deep on that sort of idea of the world being fractured across many different dimensions.
Yeah, I mean, the lack of positivity in the report stems from topics like climate change, extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, social upheaval. So there's a lot to unpack. And as we were saying just before we got on the air, there's so much to look at. We're just going to go, how about that, how about that, how about that, how about that? And that's basically what we're going to do here. Let's just start with environmental policies. It says the pandemic will make environmental policies more difficult to initiate and follow up upon, like greenhouse gas emissions fell during the pandemic, but that's not because of government policies put into place.
Yeah, I mean, CO2 is still rising. It slowed down. So the growth of CO2 being pumped into the atmosphere by heavy industry and transportation, whatever, it's slowing down. That's great. I don't know whether I truly agree whether it's going to be a huge issue. I mean, the bottom line for most of these challenges is access to capital to really invest in new infrastructure and such like. I mean, China was pretty much the only major country in the world last year that actually had any GDP growth, right? So everyone's hurting. So all of those industries that do need a deeper level of investment, like renewable energy and whatever, are just going to be on the back burner a little bit. But now what we need is world leaders to come together and work out how they can keep momentum behind these things that are so important.
Well, and once the economies eventually open up again, fossil fuel use is expected to increase.
Yes, it's an absolute certainty. Who's not craving to jump on an airplane to go somewhere? I mean, we're already seeing a lot of recovery down in the United States. Here in Canada, obviously, it's getting shut down a lot more. But I tell you what, by the time we get to 30, 40, 50% vaccination penetration, we're going to see those flights being booked. And I think by sort of early 2022, we're going to be going full steam ahead into what we were at before. And I think that there's going to be even more flights, even more heavy industry out there.
Yeah, it's we talk about it on a weekly basis. Liz Beatty's going to be joining us next hour to talk about the future of business travel and what that's going to look like, if that's going to increase, decrease, if it's going to go away altogether. And you mentioned COVID and the vaccinations. COVID-19 has accelerated and broadened the fourth industrial revolution with the rapid expansion of e-commerce, online education, digital health, remote work. So there are a lot of consequences to be paid by all of that in the next evolution that we're headed into or that we're already in.
These are deep cultural shifts across communications, across transportation, across energy. These are the three dimensions in industrial revolutions. The fourth industrial revolution is about everything being hyper-connected, driven by data, driven by automation, driven by algorithms with artificial intelligence behind them. 4 times increase in data generated by 2025. 85 million jobs could be impacted by automation in the next 5 years. There's a whole bunch of polarization and misinformation with regards to social networking and what people are saying. There's the potential to really take economies to the next level with digital services and the ability to do more. But there's also the flip side where we could end up having what they say in the report is a digital underclass of workers. So people that can't afford the technology are suddenly being left behind. And a lot of my friends that talk about this fourth industrial revolution talk about, those economies, those people that are literally being left in the dust. And there's a huge bridge between them and the people that have got the ability and means to jump ahead. So this is where governments need to create some equity and equality around access to digital services.
Is this going to create an even bigger divide? Like, say, we have the upper class, which is a small piece of the pie. We have a middle class that is the majority of the pie. And then we have, the lower class, those that unfortunately can't earn as much or that are experiencing things like homeless, what have you. They are a part of the pie, unfortunately, as well. That there's going to be less of the pie that's going to be middle, that it's going to be way more upper eventually, but at the same time, it's going to be way more lower.
I actually think that these people are just going to live in different places digitally, like they already do in the physical world, right? I do think that we're going to see, free platforms being utilized by people that don't have access to premium software and platforms. I do think that the upper and middle class everything's going to feel like the middle class. Everyone's got access to computers and tablets, and people may end up paying like $30 to $120 a month for various services that give them access. But I think that there's kind of a democracy that's still going to ride through in social networks, in things like collaborative documentation. I mean, things like Google Docs have been a great democratic platform for people to do activism and organize and to get behind, because they are free services. Obviously, everyone gets monetized. And what's interesting is the digital underclass is going to get monetized more than the people that choose to not be part of the algorithms, right? So that's when it gets super interesting to me. And this is like the ethics behind digital is those that choose to be part of the product and the actual product, and those that can create independence from that, so that they can protect that anonymity. And I think that there's big discussions around data privacy, surveillance, and a number of different areas that need to happen now.
Well, with the digital divide, and of course with the pandemic, where we're physically separated, do you see how people are going to stay apart permanently? Like, do you see that being part of our future?
In terms of families never getting together and just choosing to be digitally connected, Jeff?
That's fine. I'm fine with that. Like, if it's not hanging out with family, that's cool. Whatever. I'll take that loss.
I can't wait to see my family. I don't think so. I mean, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So everyone that's saying that there are these huge shifts, I do think there's a cultural shift, but I also think that it's deeply ingrained in us as humans to crave connection and love and to closeness. I haven't shaken your hand or hugged you for at least a year at this point, Jeff. These things are pretty tough,
I last saw you, early summer?
That's
something
right.
like that. You popped over and we stayed apart on the driveway, and that was about it. So it's been it's been a long time.
I just don't think that we've shaken human society to the core in terms of how we operate. I just don't see it. I think in work culture, yes, business travel, it's going to be absolutely decimated, and you're going to be able to chat to the other expert after me. Yeah. And I do think those aspects. I think in personal life, I think everyone's craving to get back together, Jeff,
Yeah, and hey, sooner rather than later, and I think we all need a bit of good news in terms of health and what's come out of this global risks report is that the number of COVID-19 vaccinations globally has surpassed the total number of confirmed cases.
Yeah, that actually came from a Financial Times article I sent to you, and I just added it to the briefing notes here because I thought that it was pretty poignant. There's a lot of people that are mad about COVID. I get it. I'm mad about COVID. Typically by every Friday, I'm pretty mad because I've been working in my basement. But we've created a number of vaccines in the world, and we've vaccinated a ton of people, and that's within sort of a year, really, of it really hitting many countries around the world. We have to be really thankful for what we've achieved, and the death. I know no death is great, but like the death rate in terms of comparison to other pandemics like the Hong Kong flu or the Spanish flu or whatever has actually been quite small in the scheme of things. It's just that we're paying a price with our mental health and being locked in our basements, right, Jeff?
Yeah. Looking as well at some other elements here that we wanted to discuss. Looking at India and looking at a few different countries here,
right.
Because you mentioned China earlier on. Well, what about India? India is projected to become the world's most populated country.
Yeah. You know what? This is going to be the number 2 economic power in the world by 2030, with China at number 1 and the US at number 3. India has been hugely underestimated, mostly, I think, because of the caste system within it. I think that there's going to be a lot of democracy. There's a lot of problems there right now between farmers and Modi and the Modi government and whatever, and that needs to be resolved, discussed, and we need to really get behind our farmers there. But in India, hugely smart people, incredibly productive, and this is an economy that's just going to take over the world. If you look at the top 10 companies in North America in terms of tech, the majority of them have got Indian CEOs, right? Have you noticed that, Jeff? And it's like, this is it. This is the power shift, right? And we've got huge consultancy like Tata and whatever. In India has been forgotten in the Western world because it's a culture that's very different from who we are. Yes, there's a lot of people within our society that are of East Indian heritage, and do you know what? I've worked with tons of these people and people from Pakistan and other places over the last 25 years. And do you know what? They're just dynamite people to work with. So India is going to be an incredible power. You know what? And they're gonna pally up with people like China. And we're not going to know what's hit us in North America.
All right. What about Russia? Why should we be especially watching Russia?
So what's really interesting here, Russia isn't so much of a superpower anymore. However, Putin is mischievous. He's just locked up his political rival for a couple of years, and maintaining power. They've kind of lost power over the years, but in terms of being that sort of chaos in the world, they're absolutely perfect. And do you know what? They're like Putin and Xi Jinping from China, the best buddies. And it's just going to become this alliance out there. And it's going to be Russia. It's going to be a number of countries in Asia. China's going to be the de facto ringleader, and we're going to see some very interesting things happen. In fact, Xi did a talk as part of the World Economic Forum, and he said, "You know what? We need to take down our barriers. We don't need to have conflict. We have to work together." And I kind of agree. China doesn't go to war. China doesn't get involved in that conflict. They focus on productivity and building out their ability to create wealth and become an economic force. And this is why the West is going to really fall back on its heels and have a really hard time. I think in North America, in the next 15 to 20 years, we could find ourselves in really hot water if we don't try and work out how to work well without thinking that there's conflict that needs to be part of our narrative.
Getting back to the pandemic and coming back home as we round things out here, Nick, we saw how the world reacted to and was not prepared for the pandemic. How will governments react to these warnings in the future?
I think they've been reminded of the absolute economic and political devastation that can be caused by these things happening. I think they've completely underestimated it. Very few governments in the world were really prepared. I mean, China was unprepared, but you know what? They could move quickly. And as I said, they were the only country really to gain any growth in GDP last year. But, they pretty much had to lock everyone at home for like a number of months to get this all working. You know what? Every single government guaranteed will have pretty steadfast and well thought through plans for when another pandemic comes. And do you know what, Jeff? There's about 700,000 coronaviruses out in nature of a zoonotic type, which means that it can jump from animals to humans. So, there's a good probability that we're going to see more things pop up. We had SARS, we had MERS, we had Ebola, and those three didn't really jump like COVID-19 did. And it's a sneaky virus, Jeff, and there's going to be more of those sneaky viruses. So I think that there needs to be global collaboration. I think there needs to be federal government plans and significant plans and bravery from a political standpoint to actually make good decisions. We could have avoided a lot of the stress and worry and everything that we're facing in the world if the political leaders didn't sit on their own laurels and worry about how popular they were going to be. Right?
Well, and we've talked about it in the past. Politically speaking, those leaders would only look at what happens on their watch. Why should they spend the time and the energy trying to look at the big picture of things when there's a lot of people not really focused on that, saying, well, what do I need to worry about that? Why should I need to worry about possible flooding that might happen in 30 years if we don't do? We're not going to think about that. We don't want to put our time and energy and tax money into that right now. Forget about it. And those leaders would not have wanted to fight those battles. But now our focus is shifted in that we can look at longer term. We have had something that has really stopped the world from turning, and now we are thinking more long term. So hopefully, maybe it's a trend, and maybe it's a trend that's going to last for a while. But maybe the politicians and global leaders will be thinking long term because it doesn't fall on deaf ears when talking to the public.
You know what? I think this is where leaders, and I've been talking about this a lot with my clients, need to stop and need to start looking at how Indigenous cultures viewed their actions of the day and look to the future. The First Nations in Canada and the Iroquois and the Haudenosaunee people, I probably butchered that, I apologize. They talk about seventh generation thinking. So that's about 150 to 175 years into the future. The things that you do today matter and they resonate through time. And this is what I'm working with a lot of different people to say, okay, this year, this last 5 years, even the next 50 years, it's like a speck of dust in the fabric of the universe. So let's start thinking longer term. I guarantee you, China thinks in centuries and it thinks in millennia. So that's why they're going to be resilient. And if we keep thinking in 4-year cycles because of political election cycles, we're going to we're going to get 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and it's just going to be slow going for any sort of human progress for places like Canada, for places like the US, especially the UK as well. We just need to transcend, get over it, and focus on doing what we need to do, which is protecting lives, ensuring everyone's got the ability to access, equitable, services and the right to own property and good schooling and good health and all of these things. Unfortunately, there's too many. I'll say this: there's too many men in charge, and we need to have more women in charge, Jeff. Well,
hopefully that is trending the right way, of course. Check out NikolasBadminton.com. Futurist researcher, keynote speaker, Nikolas Badminton. Nick, appreciate this. We'll talk again next week. Thank you, sir.
We sure will. Take care, Jeff.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, a lot to unpack there, and Nick did a great job of doing just that.